Good morning and welcome to the COAST 2020 annual meeting. I'm Jennifer Wicks, your host behind the scenes from Learning and Development. Glad to work with the COAST team today to bring you this annual meeting in a virtual way. We're very excited to have you join and look forward to your participation throughout the entire day today, through the sessions this morning, and also through the lightning rounds this afternoon. As you see on the schedule, you can see how the day will go and a lot of unique opportunities to learn today. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Krista Kamer. She's going to run through this whole session today, walking you in and out of each and every presentation. She's the director of COAST. And with that, Krista, I'll hand it over to you to get started.
Thank you, Jennifer. And good morning to all of you that we have with us here today. Welcome to the first virtual COAST annual meeting. 2020 has been quite the year so far. So, while it's disappointing that we cannot meet in person, I will say that this format does allow for far more people to participate than we would normally have. Right now we have close to 80 people in the audience. We had almost 200 people sign up for the meeting today. And I expect that people will be coming in and out because it's virtual, so you can pop in, see the parts you want to see, leave for a while, come back, and I hope that many of you will be with us throughout the day. Our day is broken up into 3 sections, beginning with remarks this morning from Dr. Timothy White, Chancellor of the CSU. Chancellor White has led the CSU for the last 8 years, and under his leadership, the funding from the state grew from $2.3 billion to $3.6 billion, and student enrollment increased from 436,000 to over 480,000 students. Chancellor White launched the Graduation Initiative 2025, an ambitious plan to dramatically improve graduation rates and eliminate equity gaps. We're just halfway into the plan's timeline and already seeing great success. Chancellor White is retiring at the end of this year, so this is the last time we'll hear from him as Chancellor of the CSU. I know that he's looking forward to spending more time with his family and, as an avid sailor, finally having some time to get out on the water. Chancellor White, welcome. I'm so glad you're able to be here with us today. It's always a pleasure to hear from you, and I appreciate you making time for us in your schedule. I want to thank you for your unflagging support of COAST over the last 8 years. COAST has grown significantly during that time, and all of our progress would not have been possible without the backing and support of your office, which provides resources and financial support that allow us to do our jobs and serve the faculty and students of the CSU and the state of California. When we're out talking to lawmakers, legislative staff, and agency folks, I'm always so proud to remind them that the CSU is the nation's largest and most diverse 4-year public university system. On behalf of the COAST Executive Committee, all the faculty and students who are part of COAST, thank you again, Chancellor White, for all your support, and I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Krista, and good morning, everybody. Well, this home office it used to be great. Now the sun is moving towards, the equinox, and so now the sun comes. So I ordered drapes, but it takes like 6 weeks to get drapes, so I apologize for the poor lighting, but if that's the biggest problem we have today, it's all good. So, Kristen, again, thank you for your leadership and your kind introduction. It is a pleasure to join with all of you today to celebrate COAST's achievements. I look forward to this every year to sort of get a chance to think more intellectually than some of the other tasks that the Chancellor has to deal with. I like to highlight your critical, important work to protect our state's natural environment and to acknowledge our shared commitment to the excellence and the inclusivity that we pride ourselves on by diversifying participants and the nature of our research and educational programs. As Krista said, my days as Chancellor are waning. I have, as you might expect, a chance to reflect a bit upon my time with you. It started in late 2012 and I'll end in early January of next year. And high among the things that I feel like we've made good progress on is the bright accomplishments that COAST has demonstrated and evolved and grown, as Krista said in her opening comments. And so I want to thank her, but also thank all of you for doing the good work that has made this enterprise as profound as well respected as it is. Somewhat taking coals to Newcastle, and your work could not come at a more important time. And as there's growing awareness and in most places, and for a while not in Washington D.C., but I think that's about to change in January, of the alarming magnitude of the negative impact that human activity has on our world's fragile ecosystems in general, but certainly the marine ecosystem in particular. And climate change is real. Our oceans are in crises for a variety of reasons, and our planet is in peril because of that. And this is a troubling reality that transcends politics. It's race and class. It's coastal areas and oceans face the growing threats around the globe. And certainly no exception here in California, with over 840 miles of stunning coastline. Today is the envy of the world. And the question for us, and the challenge for us, and the need for us is to sustain it for the millennia ahead. The challenge, we face a huge impact on our population. Over 70% of California's 40 million people live currently in coastal areas, and those that are closest in the low-lying areas, of course, are at risk in their lifetimes of the rising sea levels, let alone the generations to come, also with storms and flooding and pollution and contaminated seafood becoming more and more of an issue. So that's why your work is indeed so critically important. About 50 years ago, during a keynote at teaching on the environment at the University of Michigan, where I spent 15 or 16 years, Barry Commoner, Dr. Commoner, was a pioneering ecologist, and he shared at the U of M some prescient words back then. And I quote, "The environmental crisis is a grim challenge. It is also a great opportunity. We may yet discover how to devote the wisdom of science and the power of technology to the welfare, the very survival of man." And today we would say of humankind. Indeed, it was an environmental crisis, a massive, devastating oil spill that many of you recall off the coast of Santa Barbara in 1969, a year before Dr. Commoner spoke those words, that helped spark a global call to action to protect our natural environment. And that spark ignited a flame that continues to burn right across our university and illuminates pathways to innovative solutions, groundbreaking research, and transformative learning opportunities that Dr. Commoner envisioned over half a century ago. And these are the hallmarks of COAST, where faculty members, research scientists, along with hundreds of undergraduate and graduate students collaborate across our campuses, our biological fuel stations, and marine laboratories to address critical ocean and coastal issues. Many of you know the beginnings of COAST were humble. In 2008, a grassroots effort led by a small group of faculty from San Francisco State, Monterey Bay, and San Jose State's Moss Landing Marine Laboratories. But today, COAST has grown to more than 600 members and active participants from each of the 23 campuses across this great state. And since its founding, COAST has funded 1,424 student awards, totaling almost $2.3 million, emphasizing high impact practices like undergraduate research, as well as professional development and proposal writing, and presentation of research results at scientific meetings and the like. COAST has also funded almost 190 faculty awards, 187 to be precise, totaling over $2.5 million, with more than $15 million in resulting extramural funding that came from that sort of seed investment. In fact, the total amount of extramural funding resulting from awards to faculty and students exceeds $16.6 million, which is really quite remarkable, and it underscores our growing capacity to conduct marine and coastal research that powerfully and positively impacts the most critical environmental issues facing our communities, our state, and our nation, to be honest. Along the way, you've successfully cultivated strong relationships with state leaders, public officials, nonprofit organizations, and notably in today's hyper-politicized climate of disinformation, COAST serves as an honest and transparent broker of scientific data and research. Your members are regarded as trusted resources for unbiased, scientific information that can be used to inform decision-making, policy development, and ultimately public opinion and public knowledge writ large. So it should come at no surprise that your work continues to flourish. I'm particularly pleased to learn of two developments since I last spoke with you almost 15 months ago now. The first is the State Science Information Needs Program, established thanks to a one-time appropriation of $3 million in last year's budget, and it focuses directly and exclusively on providing the marine, coastal, and coastal watershed-related scientific information needed to fill the knowledge gaps identified by state agencies and the legislature. And this program promises to be a real game changer for Coast. Whereas previously your largest awards were approximately $20,000, this program will now allow you to fund projects in their entirety. And the first awards funded by this new program will address two of the most serious environmental problems we face on a global scale: the microplastics and sea level rise. Funds totaling nearly $800,000 will be awarded to researchers at San Diego State and at CSU San Marcos to invest the role that microplastics play in contaminating marine and estuarine organisms. And to more fully understand their prevalence in our environment, this research will help regulators address and assess risks to humans and to wildlife. And an additional award of up to $800,000 to fund sea level rise will be announced in early 2021. I'm also very pleased and excited about Coast's efforts to promote equity and diversity. Under Krista's leadership, Coast has launched a campaign to fight institutionalized racism and to create a more diverse, inclusive marine science community. That campaign includes professionally facilitated implicit bias training and rigorously evaluating Coast award programs to look for practices that may unintentionally discriminate against students and faculty of color. And on a panel later this morning, I understand that Coast members will discuss ways we can strengthen our commitment to championing diversity in scientific research, teaching, and mentoring. While I know this is just the start of your efforts in this regard, or the continuation for many of you as well, I applaud you for this consequential work. Indeed, together you've built Coast into this strong community, one that's far more than simply a collection of very smart people working on very important issues with the marine and coasts, but you're a collective that shares a profound respect for our environment, for a respect for sustainability, for your students, and for each other. You work with a collaborative and an indomitable spirit, and I know you will ultimately realize your vision of a California that actively and sustainably manages its coast and ocean through the application of scientific knowledge by a well-educated, diverse, environmentally literate workforce and citizenry. I am simultaneously a scientist and a boater at heart, with an enduring love for the ocean and our majestic coastline and a deep concern for its future. It's always been a special pleasure to support Coast, and I will continue to closely follow your important work as you advance the mission of Coast and the university as well. It so powerfully and closely reflects the broader mission and the values of the California State University. You know, the interesting thing about science, my own career, thinking back to the days at Michigan and Berkeley, the full impact and the importance of your work may not always be realized immediately. And sometimes it takes years, if not decades, for things that you discover or talk about with students or rethink orthodoxies of the past, that the importance of that becomes known in the future. I hope you never get frustrated by that aspect, and I hope you continue to find inspiration in the joy of discovery in California and its uniquely beautiful natural environment. All those years ago when Dr. Kaminer stood at the University of Michigan's Chrysler Arena and declared to a gathering of 13,000 people, so obviously that was pre-COVID, right? The proper use of science is not to conquer nature, but to live in it. And that's a quote. Think about that. The proper use of science is not to conquer nature, but to live in it. So let us continue to heed his call to rise and meet the threats to our environment, using science as a tool to create a much more sustainable future, not only for the oceans and coastal areas we all hold so dear, but to future generations of Californians. So again, let me close by saying thanks. Thanks for everything that you do for the CSU, its students, in our great state. Krista?
Oh, Chancellor White, thank you so much for being here. I wish we were in person in Dumke Auditorium. We would all clap. And I wish that we could be together, especially while this is the last time that we'll see you as the Chancellor. But you would always be welcome back to just come to any Old Coast meeting in the future and hang out with us. So, but I do want to thank you for everything, all your support over the last 8 years. And we wish you all the best in your retirement, which is quite well deserved.
Thanks. Yeah, I may come back as a postdoc or something in Coast.
Okay. We'll take you.
Okay.
Thank you.
I can still pipette with the best of them.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, folks. Take care.
Okay. So next we will hear from Dr. Eduardo Ochoa, the president of CSU Monterey Bay. President Ochoa has led the Monterey Bay campus since 2012, and prior to that, he served as a faculty member and an administrator at several other campuses in the CSU system: Fresno, Los Angeles, Pomona, and Sonoma. From 2010 to 2012, President Ochoa was the Assistant Secretary for Post-Secondary Education in the Obama administration. In this role, he served as the Chief Advisor on Higher Education Issues to the Secretary of Education, and he headed the Office of Post-Secondary Education. And I am sure that he is really looking forward to seeing who President Biden selects as his Secretary of Education. President Ochoa has been the chair of the Coast President's Council since 2014, and in that capacity, he's been a wonderful advocate for Coast among his fellow presidents and with the Chancellor's office. I greatly value his guidance and perspective. He often keeps me in check, and I appreciate all the time that he dedicates to ensuring the continued success of Coast. President Ochoa, thank you for being here today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Krista, and thank you, Chancellor White, for your remarks and support of Coast over the past 8 years. For Coast, it's been a time for statewide recognition and associated one-time funding, a time for active response to the COVID pandemic, and a time to draft a strategy to begin to address the lack of racial and ethnic diversity in the field of marine science. We all know the background around much of this, as 2020 has provided a sobering canvas for social issues and a difficult time for most higher ed institutions. As much as the institutions that comprise and support Coast, the leadership of Coast has responded to the challenges facing the Council. And as is the case with the CSU system as a whole, Coast has continued with our core mission while moving largely online. And that core mission is to advance knowledge of marine and coastal resources and the processes that affect them, and to provide scientific information to stakeholders for informed decision making. And this mission is increasingly important. Last year's $3 million allocation reflects the state of California's recognition of Coast's research agenda and the pressing need to dramatically increase meaningful support for research confronting California's most critical ocean concerns and solutions. And the 2 RFPs issued under the State Science Information Needs Program that was enabled by this allocation for research into microplastics and global sea level rise are reflective of that recognition. But the fact that the $3 million was a one-time allocation means that annual budgeting and resource allocation will continue to be a challenge for Coast if we are to fulfill our mission. And this mission continues to be of critical importance, a fact that is recognized not only by legislative support, but by external funding for Coast faculty. In fact, during the academic year 2018-2019, research and development external funding secured by Coast members accounted for 10.2% of the CSU's overall R&D external funding. And although this funding is largely non-Coast related, it underscores the value of the work being performed by Coast members. The number of awards, in fact, in that year were 618, involving 223 individual PIs for over $45 million. This is all awards, coastal and no coastal R&D and non-R&D. And if you look at coastal R&D alone, that represents 341 awards involving 148 individual PIs and nearly $30 million. But expanding the reach of marine science is more than a funding issue, and COAST is responding to the opportunity that has emerged in the past year with increased awareness of systemic racism. Anyone involved in marine science education can see the lack of diversity above the undergraduate level, and COAST is uniquely positioned to help change that. And to that end, COAST has developed an anti-racism and diversity inclusion statement and created an anti-racism and diversity resources page on the COAST website with carefully curated content that is frequently updated. COAST is convening also a panel on inclusive diversity in scientific research, teaching, and mentoring at today's annual meeting, which starts at 11. We will offer professionally facilitated implicit bias training in January of 2021, and we will be evaluating our own award programs to look for practices that may unintentionally discriminate against students of color, and we'll take action to remedy those practices, asking our partners to do the same. These actions are a beginning, but an important set of first steps to help the community of marine science research to reflect the ethnic and racial diversity of California. In doing so, COAST can also make meaningful progress toward raising awareness of marine and coastal issues in communities less represented in academia. In closing, let me remark that I am optimistic about COAST's future and the work being done by all of COAST members. While we are in difficult times, there are markers of progress and reasons for optimism. The U.S. election will bring a higher regard for scientific research and results, and the announcement of a potentially effective vaccine for COVID-19 will mean that we will be able to attend our next annual meeting in person. I look forward to that and to hearing in person of the results of another excellent year of research by the COAST community. And now let me hand it back to Dr. Kamer.
Oh, thank you, President Ochoa. I think many of us are looking forward to the return of science actually being considered even in the first place. So thank you very much for joining us this morning. I appreciate it. I am now going to take you through to the break, which will be at 10:45. I want to cover a few of our accomplishments since the last time we met in April of 2019. If you have any questions as I'm speaking, please go ahead and put them in the chat box, and I'll do my best to answer them at the end if there's time. So let's see. In 2019-2020, COAST made awards totaling over $373,000 to CSU faculty members and students, and this was over half of our budget last year. We supported a number of faculty members and students throughout the entire 23 campus system. One of the awards that we made was to fund a workshop on the sampling, processing, and detection of microplastics. The workshop was led by a group of faculty members from Southern California and included quite a few external stakeholders who were actively involved. There were a number of components to this workshop, including field sampling, and then some sample processing in the lab where we all got to try our hand at filtering microplastics out and trying to identify them. This year, we've also been really flexible with regard to the awards we've made to faculty and students in light of the COVID-19 situation. Our goals here are to facilitate research and learning and to maximize participation however possible. So COVID disrupted everyone's research last spring, and many labs are now just starting back up, and even if they're running at limited capacity. So knowing that projects will just generally take longer, we granted automatic 6-month no-cost extensions to all of our active faculty awards. We were also really concerned about students. So many graduate students work in order to put themselves through school, we all know that, and we were worried that their jobs, either on campus or off campus, may have simply vanished, leaving them without any reliable source of income. So graduate students who'd been selected to receive awards were given the option to rebudget those awards and use the money to help support themselves so that hopefully they could remain in their degree programs and ultimately graduate. Our summer internship program was probably our biggest challenge so far. Every summer we place about 15 CSU students with state and federal agencies and nonprofit organizations. These are incredibly impactful experiences, so of course we were really worried about how remote participation would affect the overall experience. But all of our hosts pivoted to projects that could be done remotely, and our interns did a great job of showing up and making the most out of the opportunity. So one of the metrics that we track is outcomes of prior COAST support. So in 2019-20, faculty members were awarded $1.3 million in external funding as a result of previous awards. So I want to give a shout out to some of these folks this year, but there's actually two things I really would like you to notice about this slide. One, there is a $400,000 award to Dr. Jay Smith at Pomona, and that resulted, at least in part, from a graduate student research award that was $3,000. And that's not the first time that this has happened. We've had other instances where an award to a graduate student has led to the faculty member securing some pretty significant extramural funding. The other thing I'd like you to notice is that it can take a while for this to happen. So, for example, Dr. Matt Edwards at San Diego State had a COAST award in 2014-15, and it took a while for that to pay off, but it resulted in $300,000 in external funding last year. So tenacity pays off. And for anyone who's had a COAST award, and you keep hearing from us years and years, even after your award has ended, this is why. We want to make sure that any follow-up funding you get, we know about it and can count it. So you heard the President Ochoa and the Chancellor both mention this $3 million one-time allocation to COAST. And many of you have probably heard about this over the last year through our listserv, and some of you have even applied for funding through this new program. But in case you missed it, COAST received an allocation of $3 million in the 2019-20 state budget. And it's important to note that because this was last year's budget, the amount is not impacted by the recent decrease in state revenue due to COVID. The $3 billion is intact and available. The funding was requested by state, Senate, and Assembly members in order to dramatically increase meaningful support for research confronting California's most critical ocean concerns and solutions. With the funding, we established the State Science Information Needs Program, which funds projects that will provide the scientific information needed to fill knowledge gaps identified by state agencies and the legislature. This program is different because it engages state agencies from the beginning of the process to ensure that their needs are well represented in the requests for proposals that we issue. So for example, in the microplastics and microfibers request for proposals that we released in January of this year, there was an opportunity to submit a proposal on any topic related to microplastics and microfibers. But Amy Vieira, our policy and communications strategist, worked with state agencies and next will deliver the scientific results that the California Ocean Protection Council and the State Water Resources Control Board need for informed decision-making, policy development, and management of California's natural resources. We released a second RFP on sea level rise in April of this year, and those proposals are currently in review with the expectation that we'll announce the awards in March of next year. We also plan to release a third RFP early next year, but we haven't announced the topic yet. And we also have not yet determined whether or not there will be a fourth RFP. So that information, we'll make that decision in the first half of next year. So the last thing I want to talk about before the break and this morning's panel is COAST's effort to address systemic racism and promote inclusive diversity. I think a lot of us have known for a long time that there are real issues around a lack of diversity in marine science and in some related disciplines. I know that I personally was frustrated, but I didn't see how I could structure our existing programs differently to address the issue. Then George Floyd was killed at the end of May, and locked in by COVID, I think many people finally couldn't look away from what was happening, and the country really began to have a discussion about systemic, pervasive, and institutionalized racism in a way that I haven't seen in my lifetime before. So I'll be honest, at first I really resisted putting out a statement in response to George Floyd's murder. I was frustrated with what I saw from some organizations and institutions in our sphere. They seemed to be putting out statements that condemned police brutality and racism, but it wasn't clear to me that anything was going to be different at the end of the day. It wasn't clear to me that it was anything more than just a statement. And I really didn't want to jump on that bandwagon and draft a statement with noble sentiments but no plan of action behind it. I thought that that would just further perpetuate the problem. And I didn't know what we could do, to be honest. I felt like we were already doing everything we could to try to address the lack of diversity in marine science. We're already at the most diverse four-year public university system in the country. So this picture on the right is actually a chemistry class at CSU East Bay. As I said, we're already situated within the most diverse four-year public university system in the country. And we give our students the opportunity to participate in high-impact practices like undergraduate research and internships. I couldn't figure out what Coast could do better. It was actually our program assistant at the time, Jessica Mejia, who really pushed back at me and got me to see that we could do more, and that while it would take time, it wouldn't necessarily take money. And so if we could find the time, perhaps we could begin to move the needle on this topic. So Coast staff spent a lot of time in conversation with each other and with the executive committee, and we decided to really lean into this moment. We committed to a sustained programmatic investment in real and meaningful change. This will take years, I think, and even when the goals are reached, the daily on-the-ground work has to continue. So the first step was our statement, which every time I read it, it still really resonates with me. I think it captures where we are as a country and where Coast members are as a cross-section of STEM and situated within the CSU. This statement articulates a vision for the future in which more people of color pursue and succeed in attaining degrees in marine science and related disciplines at both the undergraduate and graduate level. More people of color hold faculty positions in marine science and related disciplines, and more people of color enter the non-academic workforce in marine science and other STEM-related fields, including education, industry, and public policy. This is the future that we want to see. If you haven't read the statement yet, I hope you will take the time to do so. Along with the statement, we published a list of resources that we believe can help the CSU marine community become more equitable, inclusive, and diverse. This resource online is organized into different sections that include material on structural racism itself, barriers in STEM, geosciences, and ocean sciences. But the largest section is the What Can We Do section, which has a lot of resources with strategies and practices that you can implement to create a more equitable and inclusive environment in your lab, in your classroom, and perhaps even in your department. Some of the pieces were written, in fact, by our panelists that we'll be hearing from next this morning. So this is a curated, dynamic resource. It's certainly not exhaustive, but it's helped me, and I hope that it will help you get started if this is a subject that you want to understand more fully. We update this part of the website pretty regularly, and we welcome your suggestions. So if you have anything you think we should consider adding, please let me know. Right now, we're working on a series of professional development opportunities for faculty. So we have today's panel, which is designed to give you a little bit of insight into topics that you might want to pursue further. And we'll be offering workshops over the next year that will help, that will give you the opportunity to pursue these topics in much greater detail. And all of these efforts are intended to promote a future that looks a little bit more like this in marine science. So we have just a couple minutes left before the break. We have time for a few questions. I don't see anything yet in the chat, but if anyone has a question, you're welcome to put it into the chat box that you can see, and we will answer it in the couple minutes that we have left. I hope someone has a question. We'll give you guys plenty of time.
a little quiet in the chat pod there, Krista.
Oh. I didn't plant any questions. I guess I should have.
I can bring up the schedule if you'd like to take a look at the schedule with everyone today.
Okay. No question. Okay. Yeah, why don't we, let's see, I have the next, oh, there's my little crab with the questions. Okay, so we are going to take a break now until 11 a.m., at which point I hope that you will return for this fantastic panel that we're going to have to talk about inclusive diversity in a number of aspects. So thank you. Jennifer, let's go to the break.
Okay, great. We'll see everyone back at 11 o'clock. Looking forward to it. Thanks, Krista.